Helen asks, I understand that the laity are not to be, where'd it go? I understand the laity are not to be obedient to clergy who are counseling in heretical ways. Father Sabas Aguritis recently explained about this. I'm wondering about monastics under obedience. If they find themselves in such a situation, what are they to do? Especially the ones who are not hermits and live cenobitically. Well, the same principle applies to all Orthodox Christians, no matter if you're in the monastery, you're married, that we do not have a ultimately blind obedience. In terms of faith, dogma, we do not follow the bishop if he is not teaching the faith once delivered. He's not teaching that which has been accepted by the ecumenical councils and by the church throughout its history. We do not follow them into their heresy and delusion. As we saw during the time of the Renovationists, we had obviously, what would our contemporary blind advocates of blind obedience say if they were in 1924 Russia, they were in a parish or a diocese which was taken over by the Renovationists? Their bishop became a Renovationist. What would they say? Blind obedience? No, of course they wouldn't. They would say this is a clear sign of this man is an apostate from the church, and we must obey the church hierarchy that is true, is faithful, and not this bishop or this priest that is. So there is no such thing as total blind obedience in the Orthodox Church. That's a major error on the part of a lot of people today. Now, having said that, we have to have the discernment to understand what is the Orthodox faith and how is it violated, right? So that presupposes that all of us know our faith, and there is no way around that. And again, if there was a general rejection of the Renovationists, as you saw, they went from 20,000 to 6,000 parishes in about a year and a half. How did that happen? Because the faithful knew Orthodoxy. They had an experience of Orthodoxy, enough of them in enough places, enough parishes around the Russian church, that they didn't have to wait for someone to tell them that these are innovators and not the Spirit of God. And that is what the Orthodox Church again and again has had in the face of heresy throughout its history, following the saints and not the heretics in order to overcome the various betrayals. Usually, as we said, the big problem, like St. Peter said, St. Peter, the higher martyr, said, the greater problem is renovationism, the greater problem is heresy, the greater problem is delusion in the church, far worse than any persecution. So the same applies in the monastery. If the abbot follows the heretical teachings of a bishop or a synod or the world or whatever it is, he's an apostate, the monks get up and leave, or they eject him, because they're no longer under obedience, since he is no longer obedient to Christ. See, there's a hierarchy and there's a line. Obedience to Christ on the part of the bishop or the abbot, we are obedient to the abbot. And then we're saved. That's how the Lord set it up. He gave his apostles the power to bind and loose. And throughout history, he will be with us. That's how the church works. That's how the Lord intended it. But the presupposition is faithfulness. So if there is someone who's innovating and departing from the holy tradition, departing from the ethos of the church, departing from the dogmas of the church, and these things are made public and they're preached and defended, then we have to be on guard, vigilant, and not follow. Now, how is it going to work out in every situation? You need discernment. I can't answer 1,001 different circumstances, obviously. Everyone has to have discernment how they should approach this particular bishop, priest situation. There's places where you might be very patient and not immediately walk away, depending on the stance of the person, what degree they're deluded, what kind of delusion. There's a variety of circumstances, and nobody can answer that with one comment or one rule. There needs to be discernment. That's why you have spiritual fathers. That's why you go to the spiritual father and you seek that. And you should never take it on yourself to make those decisions. You should also consult the spiritual father or the abbot or the bishop or whoever it is that you're consulting who's Orthodox. Is this an Orthodox thing that's going on? Is this the Orthodox faith they're teaching? Is this an innovation and departure from orthodoxy, and what should I do? How should I respond to that? Is it a level of personal error, or is it now being preached and taught as orthodoxy when it's really a delusion? All these things need to be discerned. But the monk is in the same position as the people. The monk has a much more intense and tight and strict obedience in terms of his daily spiritual life. So he'll go daily and confess his thoughts. He'll have a much closer and more intense spiritual training that goes on, right? So that some lay people try to make that kind of obedience possible in the world. It's not really possible. It shouldn't be even attempted. That kind of daily intense. I go to my spiritual father with every thought. And that's not possible. In the monastery, it's a struggle for the abbot if he's got a big monastery. How much more outside of that? So practically speaking, it's not really possible. And they're not expecting lay people to have that kind of intense obedience. So the question of obedience in the spiritual world. Now, if the abbot introduces heretical teachings, he introduces women, for instance, it was a men's monastery, or young children to the monastery, those are all grounds for leaving the monastery. Those are grounds according to the teachings of the Holy Fathers. I think that answers that question. And God help us. It's always a very, very difficult thing to do, and to even take those steps, it's very difficult.